How surprised were you by the rapidity of the developments in Egypt and other places, Tunisia, Yemen, Bahrain, Libya?
I expected developments. I didn't expect it to go quite that fast. What surprised me, yes, is the rapidity rather than the actual developments.
How do these developments in the last weeks that we've seen compare to the last 70 years of your studying this region? What are we witnessing these days?
We're witnessing a degree of mass participation without precedent in the past. I think it's, to a large extent, the result of modern communications. The fact that it is now possible for people to participate directly in what is happening, not just day by day, but hour by hour, to an extent and to a degree that was impossible in the past. And this is particularly true in Egypt, for example, where people were following not only hour by hour, but minute by minute with what was happening. So what was happening in Egypt, I think, was very clear. It was an expression of resentment against what they saw as an unjust and tyrannical government. Now, the question is, who replaces it? Now, I don't think that the mass movement in Cairo and others like them elsewhere really want a takeover by the Muslim Brothers or other religious organizations. But the Muslim Brothers have two immense advantages as compared with all other trends in the Islamic world. One is that they have a network of communication through the mosque and the pulpit to which no other political trend has access. And the other, perhaps even more important, is that they use a familiar language. They use a language and terminology that are immediately understood and to which people can immediately respond. And that, I think, is why the danger of a takeover by religious extremists is a very real one.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, whose name is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Where are they behind the scenes in this whole picture?
Everywhere. They are one of the main motivating forces in the whole movement, the whole religiously expressed movement in these regions. And they are, of course, motivated, among other things, by a very powerful hostility to Israel. That is a very negative factor. It's also a positive factor in that an increasing number of people in the Arab world are coming to the conclusion that their main danger, the main threat to their world, is not Israel but Iran, and that Israel might even be a useful ally in confronting the Iranian danger. I have heard this view expressed by people in Egypt and in other Arab countries, and that's an encouraging sign. It's still a very limited response, but the fact that it exists at all is quite remarkable.
Do you see fingerprints? We see fingerprints of Hezbollah in Egypt, and of course, being the government now in Lebanon and in Gaza. To what extent?
So Hezbollah and other movements of the same kind are everywhere. And as I said before, I mean, they do enjoy tremendous advantages in operating.
So where does that? I mean, where does that leave us? Here we have a situation of complete instability in the capitals of many countries in this region. You have Iran race for regional supremacy, developing nuclear weapons. Israel in the middle. I mean, how does this work out?
Well, there are numbers of people now in the Arab countries who don't speak out openly for a very reasonable explanation that they want to go on living. I think it's a modest, minimal aspiration for the future. But there are more and more people who, in private conversation, will tell you that they are beginning to see Israel as a positive element in the region, as an example of a smoothly functioning democracy. I have sat with friends in Arab countries watching Israeli television, and their response to this is quite remarkable. Most of them have no experience whatever of free debate. Now, thanks to Al Jazeera, they can get different points of view from different places. But the kind of free debate, open free debate, that they can watch on Israeli television is entirely new to them.
I can't resist following up on the question of Turkey. David Price Jones, with whom I had a lovely conversation yesterday, the great writer who's visiting from London with his wife Clarissa, asked a question yesterday which I think we have to think about. I mean, the military interventions that occurred in the past, many of those people are sitting in Turkish prisons today on the orders of Erdogan. The question is, where is Turkey today? And as David Price Jones asked yesterday, quoting you, as a matter of fact, is it possible that Turkey and Iran change places?
In Turkey, Erdogan has made it perfectly clear that he intends to stay. And he has been taking various steps to change the constitution, to change the whole order. He was very skillful in taking over one element of society after another. He took over the economy. He took over the universities. He took over the police. He took over the intelligence. The one thing which he wasn't able to take over, and which in the past had been the main bastion of democracy in Turkey, was the judiciary. And now he's making constitutional changes which will enable him to do even that. He is also talking more and more in Islamic terms. He's even made speeches in which he talked about the British Empire. He said the British Empire has long since disappeared, but the British Commonwealth remains an important factor in international relations. The Ottoman Empire has disappeared, and we don't want to revive it. But why shouldn't there be an Ottoman Commonwealth? Rather alarming thought, I think. Now, Iran we see moving in the opposite direction. All the evidence is that the opposition forces within Iran are growing in strength. As I said before, the two oppositions, opposition to the regime, opposition within the regime. And thanks to modern communications, we can be fairly well informed of this and know more and more about what's happening. And this, as I said, is becoming increasingly clear. If we had a, shall we say, a more active policy from outside, one could do something more to help the Iranian opposition.